I welcome you to this fifth lecture of the first week. It will be focused on the concept of postmodernism, the postmodern literary paradigm as it emerged in the international literary arena and how it was adopted in the Arabic modern literary scenario. So, the themes we'll be just going through briefly would be covering modernism, postmodernism, structuralism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, the argumentative, the semiotics, the pragmatics, feminism, post-colonialism, and postmodernism. Before modernism, it was something like neoclassicism, and before which we find classicism, the concepts of language and literature as propounded by the classical paradigms, right from the Greek philosophers who had theorized concerning language and literature, just like Aristotle in his Poetica and Rhetorica. These traditions were translated into Arabic during the heydays of translations in Baghdad under the patronage of the rulers uh, under the banner of Baitul Hikmah. So that continued constituted a literary tradition which is known as the classical literary tradition. This classicism was modified by new trends. These new trends were known as modernism. Modernism, that is known as al-hadatha in Arabic. Modernism emerged in the backdrop of the New Light in Europe, followed by uh, the East, the Eastern literary, philosophical, cultural milieus, absorbing things, borrowing themes, or adjusting themselves to the new parameters, literary, philosophical, cognitive, uh, epistemological, etc., which were developed in modern Europe in a specific geographic, civilizational, and intellectual milieus and parameters. This modernism was made the way for postmodernism when new ideas and ideas related to language and literature were formulated, then accommodated in the literary perspectives. In the postmodernism, we have structuralism, then post-structuralism, deconstruction, the argumentative, the semiotics, etc., which we'll be just passing through briefly before focusing on how they were adopted, represented, and represented in modern Arabic literary perspectives. The postmodernism actually is the cultural pluralism. It focuses on the perceptions of language and literature as modified by the structuralist thinkers in post-modern period. And if we just look at it in terms of time, we'll be finding that the heydays start with the 1990, at the last episode of the 20th century, when we'll be finding the postmodern ideas, postmodern paradigms, postmodern philosophizing of language and literature and their literary representations taking place, rather storming the world. What actually uh, makes a difference or draws a line between the classical and the modern thinking of humans related to language, literature, culture, etc., is the cultural pluralism as we find in modern times, rather postmodern times. This cultural plurality sums up humans' endeavors, experimentations, experiences, and the realities based on society. Of course, not based on some theoretical assumptions or philosophizing, mere philosophizing, rather based on the reality in society. Was the plurality of the units, ethnic, cultural, linguistic, literary units found in human societies of East and West in vast geographical stretches that constituted the concept of pluralism. So, the world has a pluralist society. Of course, the world never has been something like monolithic in nature in regard to cultures or paradigms or languages or literatures. But the thing that these things made us think afresh or revisit our concept of language and literature, accommodating multi uh, lingualism, multiculturality, multi ethnicity, etc. So, this brings to us the very core of or the theme of pluralism as it was established in modern times. It was very much eclectic in style and the performative irony among other features. So, this paradigm was the cultural pluralistic paradigm propounded by postmodernism was eclectic in its nature as well as representation. It had many facets uh, within it, embedded with it, that is feminism, multiculturalism, and post-colonialism. Building upon post-structural theory, postmodern thought defined itself by the rejection of any single foundational historical narrative. So, before that, there was a single foundational historical narrative regarding language and literature, the very concept of language and concept of literature, in which one entity uh, actually did away with the others, with the other entities. So, it was very much monotheistic, but the post-structural theory revolted against this singlistic or the monotheistic, monolithic perspective of narrative, monolithic nature of narrative, and rejected it and replaced it with the concept of meta language, metalage, al metalugha. In Arabic, the word here is metalugha. What is metalugha? Meta language, a systematic way of talking about concepts like meaning and grammar beyond the constraints of a traditional first order language. In the meta language, symbols replace words and phrases. So, here the symbols replaced words and phrases by and large on the very domain of theory. Like what is language? So, language is a symbol, it's an image based on the meaning that we find in our mind. So, when we conceive about any sentence, when we conceive about a meaning related to an event that takes place in the external world, like John is walking. So when we say John is walking, or say Mahmoud Yamshi, Yamshi Mahmoud, so we simply imagine that we can find the imprint of this sentence in terms of image. We had an image of this sentence, like John is walking, or Mahmoud Yamshi, or Yamshi Mahmoud. So this verb and this act that is taken that has taken place in the external world, outside me, outside us, it becomes embodied by an image, by a symbol, We can see this symbol, we can see this image, if we, whether or not we close our mind, our eyes. If we close our eyes, we can see it very clearly. So that was the very concept of, or it happens to be something very fundamental related to the basic concept of language in postmodern perspective, especially in regard to the semiotic theory. السيمولوجية، يعني وفق نظرية السيمولوجية والسيموتقية. السيموتقية والسيمولوجية يعني شيء واحد، مصطلحان يؤديان نفس المعنى. السيموتقية والسيمولوجية يعني نظرية تفسير اللغة على وفق المنظومة، منظومة الرموز، منظومة الإيحاء والرموز والدلالات. فهذا it combines linguistics, psychology, anthropology, and other fields to interpret those structures. So this is a fundamental point of departure between the modernist, the classical, the modernist, the classicist and the modernist paradigms, compared to the postmodernist paradigm or the postmodernism perspectives. The fallout of this concept is the nihilistic form of relativism. So the thing is that when we take that the scheme or the schema of the things in perspectives of a plurality, so here the primary concern or the focus is on the fact that things are relative. So if there is no universal, like or standardized line, single line of interpretation, or regarding any concept of language. Of course, we are concerned with the language and the teacher. Rather, you are accommodating so many things. It is the plurality domain. Then, of course, it is relativism. Something like the nihilistic form of relativism. Nihilistic because it is not fixed, it is not eternal, it is not taken as canonical, as a standard. Rather, it accommodates the things, and when we accommodate the things, the concepts, the paradigms, the perspectives, the experimentations, the literary creations, whether in the prose narrative or the poetic narratives, then it tends to be something like nihilistic in its form. The critics claim it supplants moral, political, and aesthetic ideals with mere style and spectacle. So this is one of the interpretations or the views, or the critical views of regarding the postmodern paradigm of language and literature, that is represented in some perspectives by the nihilistic form of relativism. Post-structuralism proposes that human culture can be understood by means of a structure that is modeled on language. As a result, there is concrete reality on the one hand, abstract ideas about reality on the other hand, and the third order that mediates between the two. A post-structuralist response then might suggest that in order to build meaning out of such an interpretation, one must assume falsely that the definitions of these signs are both valid and fixed, and that the author implying structuralist theory is somehow above and apart from these structures they are describing, so as to able to wholly appreciate them. The rigidity and tendency to categorize intimations of universal truth found in structuralist thinking is a common target of post-structuralist thought, while also building upon structuralist conceptions of reality mediated by the interrelationship between the signs. We know that Roland Barthes, Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, Gilles Deleuze, Jean Baudrillard, etc., with their known books like Mythologies, The Death of the Author, Speech and Phenomena of Grammatology, Writing and Difference, Margins of Philosophy, etc. These are the post-structural thinkers with their works. This image, this sort of diagram, gives the basic components of the post-modernist structure. That is, globalization has narrowed time and space, search for truth, people less likely to follow rigid ideology, greater pluralism in modern life, where there are no absolutes. The culture and structures are fragmented, means they are less predictable. Traditional labels and categories lose relevance in the backdrop of the transformation of the self and impact of ICT on social life, consumerism, etc. So this actually shows us the crux of the constructs that make up postmodern paradigm. These postmodern perspectives have been well absorbed in modern literary scenario. So here we are simply concerned about these things as a prolegomena to the history of Arabic literature or the introduction to Arabic literature. It's not a detailed study or lecture or a specific lecture about that because we'll be dealing about these things separately in the last segment of these lectures related to the modern times and postmodern times. Here, the very idea is that the history of Arabic literature as a subject encompasses all these aspects, all these paradigms, and there is hardly any literary tradition or literary perspective, whether it is modern or post-modern, or before that it is the classical or the neoclassical, but we have that they have their representations, adaptations in the literary, in the contemporary or the modern or contemporary literary perspectives, Arab literary perspectives. If you just look at the modern, postmodern Arabic novels, we have Qila' Dhamira, written by Abdurrahman Hallaq, who is a Syrian author. We have Nihad Sirius. He's again a Syrian writer. In his novel that is As-Sumt wa Sakhab. We have Yasmina Saleh from Algeria, Watan min Zajaj. Idris Ali, an Egyptian novelist, in his book, in his novel that is Infijar Jumjuma, the postmodern novel. Mahmoud Hamid, Ahlam Muharrama. And as regards the books, we'll be having that approximately all the books written by the postmodern ideologues, the thinkers, the writers in Arabic, in English or French or other European languages. Their books have been translated into Arabic. Like Jacques Derrida, Al-Kitaba wal-Ikhtilaf, we have this translation. Madakhil ila Tafkik by Jacques Derrida and others, it has been translated into Arabic. Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida's عبارات ونصوص, the translator form in Arabic. Jacques Derrida أحادية الآخر اللغوية, translated into Arabic, and we have these translators like Umar Muhaybel, Muhammad Milad, Hissam Nail, Muhammad Badawi, and others. جاك دريداس في عالم الكتابة, أنوار مغيث, منى طلبة, رولان بارت, أسطوريات, قاسم المقداد, رولان بارت, بقلم رولان بارت, ناجي العويلي, ميشيل فوكو, تاريخ الجنون في العصر الكلاسيكي, ميشيل فوكو, الكلمات والأشياء, ميشيل فوكو, جينولوجيا المعرفة, الاختلاف والتكرار, جيل دولوز, خارج الفلسفة, نصوص مختارة, جيل دولوز, الفرق والمعاودة are the same thing as we have الاختلاف والتكرار. One of the difference lies in the translator, that is the first translator was Wafa Sha'ban, الاختلاف والتكرار, and the second translation of this book was done by Abdul Aziz Al-Ayyadi. It is followed by many books written in analysis, study, analysis, and introspection, critical appreciation, analysis, or introspection of modernism, postmodernism, etc. These theories, literary theories, like الحداثة وما بعد الحداثة, ما بعد الحداثة, سياسة ما بعد الحداثية, جذر الحداثة وما بعد الحداثة في الفكر الإسلامي المعاصر, written by إحسان العارضي, ما بعد الحداثة والتنوير, written by الزواوي بغورة, ما بعد الحداثة والتفكيك, مقالات فلسفية, written by أحمد عبد الحليم عطية, ما بعد الحداثة في الرواية العربية الجديدة, الذات, الوطن, الهوية, مصطفى عطية جمعة, ليوطار والوضع ما بعد الحداثي, ضد ما بعد الحداثة, نقد ماركسي, التعبير البيئي في فن ما بعد الحداثة, الفلسفة المادية وتفكيك الإنسان, that is the materialist philosophy, materialism and the deconstruction of the man, human deconstruction, دكتور عبد الوهاب المسيري, الخبيلات ما بعد الحداثة, رهانة الذات الإنسانية من سطوة الانغلاق إلى إقرار الانعتاق by محمد بكاي, السرديات البنيوية والسرديات ما بعد البنيوية, قراءات وترجمات by سيدي محمد بن مالك, باسم علي خريسان, ما بعد الحداثة, تنويعات سردية في الرواية العربية الحديثة, written by مرشد أحمد, عبد الله إبراهيم, السردية العربية الحديثة, تفكيك الخطاب الاستعماري وإعادة تفسير النشأة. then عربيليوس, رواية ما بعد الحداثة, تجليات ما بعد الحداثة, عبد الله القصيمي, من الأصالة إلى ما بعد الحداثة, ما بعد الحداثة وتجلياتها النقدية, dealing with how this paradigm, the literary paradigm of postmodernism was applied in the domain of literary criticism. سرد ما بعد الحداثة, رواية السابع أيام الخلق مفتاحا إجرائيا, ملامح ما بعد الحداثة في أعمال محمود المسعدي, and besides other books such as شاي أسود, written by Rabi' Jabir, which is again a postmodern novel. then الغرابية في الرواية العربية, الاغتراب في الشعر العربي المعاصر, الاغتراب في الرواية العربية المعاصرة, because the very idea of displacement or estrangement happens to be firmly seated in the postmodern paradigm, postmodern perspectives and paradigm. مسارات الرواية العربية المعاصرة, أسئلة الفكر وفضاءات السرد, الرواية العربية والمحرم, التلقي, اللغة ورؤية العالم, written by سالم الفائدة. Because the postmodern paradigm as a philosophy, as a literary theory and literary enterprise, it has many things which were hardly to be accepted or welcomed by the traditional society. So there were reservations, there were rejections, there were the critics. So شعرية السرد في الرواية العربية المعاصرة. So these are the things that we have regarding the post-modern perspective in Arabic. Coming to the post-modern perspective, because in terms of time, when we look at these philosophical and literary traditions, the concepts, the ideologies, the projections in the context of time. So here we have the concept of a post-modern perspective. So we are now living in the postmodern times, not postmodern times, not simply the post-modern times. It will be having Brooklyn's immersionism, Tom Turner's postmodernism, Mikhail Epstein's trans-postmodernism in his book written in 1999 on Russian postmodernism. The Russian American slavist Mikhail Epstein suggested that postmodernism is part of a much larger historical formation, which he calls post-modernity. Then we'll be having the terms like trans-utopianism, trans-originality, trans-lyricism, trans-sentimentality, etc. In his 2006 paper, The Death of Postmodernism and Beyond, the British scholar Alan Kirby formulated a socio-cultural assessment of postmodernism that he calls shadow modernism. Related to postmodernism, we have these books, that is the Postmodernism by Jeffrey Nealon, and Against Postmodernism, a Marxist critic by Alex Kalinikos, and Jean Baudrillard, From Marxism to Modernism and Beyond by Douglas Kellner. In the domain of, so these were related to the theory of the postmodernism. The postmodern paradigm in the literary domain is represented chiefly by Trotter-Nama. This is the famous novel written by an Indo-European writer, and that is Alan Seeley, Trotter-Nama. It's a mix of, it actually goes against all the established literary paradigms that have come to us from the past eras up to the contemporary period, like the classicist theory, the neoclassicist theory, the modernist theory, the postmodernist theory. Then it is the postmodernist theory. Even this name, that is Trotter-Nama, Trotter and Nama, it combines between a Persian word that is Nama, that is the litter, like Ashur Nama, Kitab Nama, Admi Nama, Ahmad Nama. We'll be having a large number of books written in the Middle Ages as well as in the modern times, having this Nama as part of its name or the title. So this book, that is Trotter-Nama, combines between the two. In Arabic, we have بعد ما بعد الحداثة مقالات في الأدائية وتطبيقات في السرد والسينما والفن, written by Raoul Eshelman, translated by Amani Abu Rahma. So all these lead us to conclude safely that the history of Arabic literature represents all the stages of literary experimentations, like literary paradigms, literary thought and literary culture, right from the classical times up to not only the modern times, rather extended to postmodern and postmodern times, that is in the moment we are living in. So that's why Arabic now is seated in the empyrean of the literary scenario, traditions, acclaimed worldwide. Uh, and as we recollect that in 1988, Najib Mahfouz, who actually represents modernism, not post-modernism, although some perspectives of postmodernism could be identified in his literary narratives. He was recognized internationally by the world literary milieu while being conferred the Nobel Prize for Literature in recognition of his uh, primary book, that is Aulad Harithana, or Children of Kabilai, alongside other books. So with this we conclude this lecture. Thank you.